Sometimes I just get a little bit bored. Maybe we'll do another review. I already did Dead Cells. I already did Minecraft Dungeons. I'm thinking Nobody Saves the World's a good place to start. So let's do it.
A treat. That's the way to describe Nobody Saves the World. Even with its flaws, we will get into that later, Nobody Saves the World is a great game from Drinkbox Studios. I went into this not knowing what to expect, and I was pleasantly surprised, and I hope you will be too. Genuinely, I do. Hello, I am Mr.FlatFace, a man of many faces and even more opinions, and I like to do game reviews and share them to the world here on YouTube, even though no one asked for my opinion. Now, gaming has been pretty stale as of late, with nothing really releasing or striking my fancy, so I find myself scrolling through my Xbox Game Pass or through the Steam store looking for games. Now, usually I would just scroll up and down and look at the games, but not really look at the games. So I decided, at random, I would download 5 games, and the first one I downloaded was Nobody Saved the World. Imagine my surprise when this was actually an incredibly fun game. Even with its issues, I still had an incredible time playing it. So let's get into it. Before we get started, we should probably go through the history and context. So let's speed through this so then we can move on with the actual game review. Nobody Saves the World is a charming little game developed by Drinkbox Studios and published by them as well in January 2022. Nobody Saves the World is available on all platforms, and this review will be done on PC. Nobody Saves the World is an action RPG played from the top-down perspective and is designed with unique art that sets itself apart from other top-down action RPGs in the same genre. There, context blurb done. Time for the review. Let's get into it. Nobody Saves the World is a very charming little game where you and nobody, because you have amnesia and no one even knows who you are, explore a world that has procedurally generated dungeons with locked-in events. What I mean by this is that the dungeon names are the same and the challenges pertaining to the dungeons are the same, just the insides of the dungeons change every time that you die. You are tasked with stopping the Calamity, a fungus-type monster that is eating away at the world and trying to kill you. Along your journey, you unlock forms. Forms grant you the abilities to shapeshift into many different people, monsters, and mythical creatures. Need to fight in the water? Become a turtle or a mermaid. Need more strength? Try the bodybuilder or the dragon. In total, there's 18 forms to unlock, each with their own powers and quirks. There's the gist of it. Let's get into the graphics. Graphically for me, normally this is not my style of graphics, and I would not have looked at this game twice if it had not been for this random selection I decided to do. That being said, I was wrong, and that's hard for me to say. Mr.FlatFace is never wrong. The graphics actually are charming and allow comedy to happen in a way that I wouldn't have found as cute in other games. Take The Mummy, for example. For some reason, simply how she looks and talks made me immediately like her and find her humor just with her going, funnier. Or even Randy the Rad with his distorted face when he does magic. The graphics are both charming and beautiful when there's a lot going on. Graphics, though, are nothing without music. So how is the music in Nobody Saves the World? Saves the World. Here's one of the first flaws within Nobody Saves the World. The music is good for a little bit. If you spend too much time in any zone, the music starts to get very irritating because as long as you are in that zone, the music is just on a constant loop. There's also this one song that is sampled like a car alarm that's going off, and it just plays over and over again. But if you have your headphones at the right octave, you think it's your own car alarm going off, so I kept getting up to check on my own car. As long as you are within one of the zone squares, the music will just continue to loop and play itself, and it becomes irritating and grating after a while. The same goes for dungeons. Music, check. Graphics, check. What's next? Oh yes, the story. So let's go check out the story because the music is nothing to talk about any longer. Nobody Saves the World tells a very interesting and unique story in a way. You start off as a nobody. You wake up as a nobody. You don't remember anything. No one knows who you are. You're just a nobody. And when you leave the shed that you woke up in, you enter a world full of magic, form shifting, demons and ghouls and monsters, and a giant overwhelming threat called the Calamity. This is a unique aspect because you don't actually know anything, and neither does your character. And as you go through this world, you start to piece together your character's past, where you learn that you were selfish, you were greedy, you were just overall not a very good person. You also had a brother and an assistant, Randy the Rad. Love Randy the Rad. And you guys had created the Calamity when trying to increase your wand's spell casting abilities or whatever you were doing. It doesn't really go into why you did it. And your brother had sacrificed himself to save you. And when he transported you away, you had lost what was remaining of your memory after Calamity came forth out of the portal. And so your brother died, and now you, nobody, has to become a somebody through a journey where you grow as a person, or as a nobody, I guess. And you do this by just changing your entire past and future. And the world eventually loves you. And upon fighting the Calamity, you kind of like become a somebody. And everyone loves you more for being that somebody. I didn't know what to expect when coming into Nobody Saves the World, story-wise, but I was impressed. Granted, it is nothing crazy and it won't change your life, but it does give you some of those moments where you get to decipher and think of what the story has just told you and draw your own conclusions. Were you a good guy? Were you a bad guy? Did you make the right decisions or didn't you? I did like this. What I didn't like was the massive amounts of nothing in between these few good moments. You will find that there's a lot of dialogue from the guilds and other NPCs you find in the overworld that really equates to nothing much more than a time filler. It's more spamming the skip button so you can continue playing the actual combat than listening to them. But when it does have to do with nobody and his story, the story is actually really, really good. In total, Nobody Saves the World took me a little under 17 hours to complete, so I would say the story is pretty decent when it has you hooked. Now, story within this game is alright, but is the gameplay a different story? The gameplay was actually incredibly addicting, and a joy to play most of the time. We'll get into the parts that weren't so fun in a minute. You, Mr. Nobody, can transform into 18 different forms that help you along in your adventures. You level up these forms by completing challenges pertaining to what those forms are. This was really good because during those non-story rich parts, you always had a sense of progression to work towards. As you unlock new forms, you will also be able to explore new areas with these forms. Need to cross a river? Use the turtle or the mermaid. Need to pass through some saw blades? Try using the ghost. This was really fun and a great game mechanic. I also enjoyed how as a horse you can talk to a horse, but as any other form, you just get to say it's a stupid horse. This was great, but sadly, it happens not too often. So that's the forms, which I thought were great and an actually like really fun game mechanic. You kind of felt like you were both the Pokemon catcher and the Pokemon. But how's the fighting? The fighting itself is actually pretty fun in this game. The combat is very capable, and being able to switch forms always allows you to experience a fresh and unique playstyle. The enemies do scale with you for a while, but then they stop. So each zone will have a level cap for its enemies, which is super nice because it means traveling through the starting zones is a lot more fun. What I mean by this is that you get to feel powerful. When you go through there, the enemies will literally turn and run from you rather than trying to fight you. This is great because it means that you don't have to fight every single mob, making traveling through these starting zones a lot easier. Where the difficulty gets a little bit insane is actually in dungeons, where the game will give you a dungeon, give you a set of parameters like each enemy does 9,999 damage, so you'll die in one hit. And then they'll buff those enemies, they'll give them health buffs, more damage, and then put way more of those enemies in front of you, all while debuffing you. This can get extremely frustrating when it feels like the game has stacked the odds so against you. It can also be extremely rewarding when you finally figure out how to beat that dungeon. You will grind a lot because these dungeons will have parameters that really kind of negate your leveling and scaling. Throughout my playthrough, I actually found getting through the dungeons harder than the actual dungeon boss you just worked to get to. You will spend maybe an hour trying to get through a dungeon to beat the boss first try, because the enemies within the dungeon are harder than that boss. This is a weird game mechanic, and I kind of wish that it wasn't this way. Maybe put some mini bosses within the dungeon that you can fight that are a little bit harder, or make the boss a little bit harder and make the enemies within the dungeon a little bit easier, and use those dungeons to teach us game mechanics. I have to do a quick spoiler because the Calamity fight at the end of this game is actually like brutally simple. The Calamity fight that you just spent the entire game working up through and going through all these dungeons and fighting all these mobs and talking to all these NPCs and doing all these quests equates to a simple dodge the attacks, protect Randy the Rad while he does all the damage, and then hit its weak spot. This was super anticlimactic, as I expected it to be a lot harder. You just went from massive boss fights and crazy AoE attacks to this generic, basic boss. I was so unimpressed. It's a real letdown when games do all this work to pad the filler in between and then give you an anticlimactic ending. It kind of feels like you just got let down. Overall, though, you will be addicted to the gameplay because when you do figure out that dungeon or you do take out that boss finally, you get excited and immediately want to do more. Another nice feature to the dungeon system is when you finally find that boss room and activate the teleporting pad outside the room, you will never have to do the whole dungeon again. This was nice because a lot of the said dungeons from earlier are very, very, very hard, and working your way up 3 floors just to die and have to do it again was very disheartening and can lead to some very frustrating moments and possible rage quits. Not saying I did. There is side quests in this game, but they really equate to nothing more than getting stars for the doors. They do nothing to offer anything to the story. I'd rather do the side quests, though, than do the dungeons to get stars, especially, the times 9,999 damage one that kills you in one hit. So the side quests are really there just to fill time and give you stars to open doors. And the stars to open doors are just time gates, so then you have to play more of the game. It's super annoying, but I guess it's a game mechanic, so we had to talk about it. Overall, I think Drinkbox Studios did a fantastic job with Nobody Saves the World. They delivered a game that is both as much fun as it is charming. They also have made a new fan out of me, and I will be actively looking for other games made by this studio. That's why I'm giving Nobody Saves the World a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed my time playing Nobody Saves the World, and have already recommended it to other people who enjoy this style of game. It only lost points because of the music and the fact that Calamity fight was so easy. It basically fought itself, Drinkbox. We can do better. I think this was a great game, and I'm happy to have played it, and now have documented it to my channel. I deliberately didn't tell you a lot about the story because I want you to experience it on your own. I didn't want to ruin any of the genuine moments of aha or thinking. I wanted you guys to be able to go play it and think of your own conclusions, because this game does make you think. Were you a good guy? Were you a bad guy? Were you doing the right thing or were you doing the wrong thing? And I wanted you to experience that on your own. That is why this review is a bit different than our other reviews. Anyways, if you have enjoyed the content, please hit that like button, and if you feel so inclined to, subscribe. I would welcome you here. As well as let me know if you have ever played Nobody Saves the World. And if you have, how did you like it? Let me know in the comments. With that being said, I have been your host, Mr.FlatFace, the man of many faces and even more opinions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, I have some new masks to try on, as I don't have a face and I'd like to go out in public. Bye.